Welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're tackling something that literally touches every single one of our lives, but honestly is almost always completely misunderstood. We've all been taught that money is this hard science, right? Like it's all math, formulas, spreadsheets, and cold hard data. Actually, scratch that. What if I told you that couldn't be further from the truth? The reality is, money is about human behavior. It's about psychology. It's your deepest fears, your hidden desires, and how you fundamentally view the world. So get ready for a pretty major paradigm shift because today we are unpacking the true psychology of wealth. Okay, let's dive into this. I want to start right here. What is your absolute deepest fear about money? Just take a second and honestly answer that in your head. Are you terrified of losing everything? Are you afraid of never having enough to feel truly secure? Or maybe you're just anxious you're falling behind your peers. That heaviness you might be feeling right now, it's completely valid. You see, our financial anxieties don't just appear out of nowhere. They're echoes. Our past fears, the environments we grew up in, and the traumas we've quietly absorbed, they literally dictate our present financial decisions.
Section 1. Money is not math. The experience gap.
So to really master money, we kind of have to throw away the calculator for a minute and just look at the human experience. Financial decisions are rarely made on a spreadsheet. They're made at the dinner table, right? Or in the middle of a sleepless night, or in moments of sheer panic or pride. And because your lived experience is completely different from mine, the way we view financial risk and reward is going to be completely different too. Let's look at a pretty stark historical example. Imagine a young kid growing up in the 1930s, right in the middle of the Great Depression. He watches his dad cry because the bank collapsed and just wiped out their entire life savings. To that child, the stock market is a monster. Risk means literal starvation. Fast forward to him as an adult, and he might stash all his cash under a mattress for the next 50 years. Now, contrast him with a kid born in the 1970s. This kid grows up seeing the stock market shatter records on a daily basis. To him, the market is this magical wealth machine, and taking massive risks is practically a religion. Both of these people could be looking at the exact same financial data today, but they're going to make completely opposite decisions.
So the crucial point here is no one is crazy. When you see someone making a financial move that looks absolutely absurd to you, maybe they're hoarding cash in some low-interest savings account. Or on the flip side, maybe they're throwing their entire life savings into a crazy, volatile asset. You have to realize that to them, in that moment, it makes perfect sense. Their decision aligns perfectly with the unique, deeply personal reality that their specific life experiences have built for them.
And this brings us to a really fascinating psychological trap called naive realism. Basically, we genuinely believe we're seeing the world, and the economy for that matter, with perfect objectivity. But we're not. We are looking through the incredibly narrow lens of our own history. Think about a low-income worker buying a scratch-off lottery ticket. From a purely financial standpoint, experts laugh. They call it terrible math. But put on their glasses for just a second. For someone who feels totally trapped by a leaking roof and a dead-end job, that ticket isn't just a piece of paper. It's a desperately needed, fleeting moment of hope. It's a chance to dream of a life they feel completely excluded from. Suddenly, it's not crazy math. It's a coping mechanism. Section 2, the twin forces, luck and risk. Okay, so once we realize our own experiences blind us, we really have to confront two massive, uncontrollable, and honestly completely invisible forces that actually dictate our financial outcomes. Look, we all love to credit hard work for all our success and blame laziness for every failure, but the truth, it's way more complex. Let's look at this staggering number. Back in 1968, there were roughly 300 million high school-aged kids in the world. Out of all of those, only a few hundred attended Lakeside School in Seattle. Why does that matter? Well, Lakeside was practically the only school in the world that had pooled enough money to buy a computer for its students. And one of those students was a 13-year-old named Bill Gates. Gates himself actually acknowledges that without the incredibly rare luck of being at Lakeside, Microsoft just would not exist. His brilliance and his hard work met a 1 in 300 million stroke of pure luck. But if you flip that coin, you meet the dark side, which is risk. Gates had a best friend at Lakeside named Kent Evans. Kent was just as brilliant as Bill. In fact, they planned to build the tech empire together. But tragically, Kent died in a mountain climbing accident before graduation. The odds of dying on a mountain in the US, it's about 1 in a million. Both of these boys were incredibly smart. Both worked insanely hard. But one was hit by a 1 in a million stroke of luck, and the other by a 1 in a million stroke of risk. It really should teach us some profound humility when we're judging our own success, or for that matter, the failures of others. Let's move on and see how this builds into the ultimate paradox of building wealth. You see, the skills required to get rich are literally the exact opposite of the skills required to stay rich. To get wealthy, you kind of need to be a little crazy. You need radical optimism, you've got to take massive risks, and you really have to believe you can beat the odds. But to stay wealthy, that requires a total identity shift. It requires fear, intense humility, and an absolute obsession with survival. You basically have to assume that everything could be taken away tomorrow. Section 3. The magic of compounding. Now, what's really interesting here is how this transitions us to the most powerful, yet probably the least understood force in finance. We hear the word compounding all the time, right? But we usually just think of it as a boring math equation. It's not. Compounding is actually a grueling psychological test of your patience and your endurance. Notice the sheer scale of the growth over time. Warren Buffett is heralded as a genius investor, but his real secret? It's time. He started investing when he was just 10 years old. A massive, overwhelming majority of his net worth came after his 65th birthday. His superpower wasn't just picking the right stocks. It was the fact that he stayed in the game for over 3/4 of a century without interrupting the compounding process. The thing is, our brains literally cannot comprehend this kind of math. Think about it. Imagine I offer you $1 million today, or I offer you a magical 1-cent coin that doubles in value every single day for 30 days. Most people jump at the million. And why? Because on day 10, that doubling penny is only worth about $5. You'd feel like an absolute idiot for passing up the million. Even on day 20, it's just a little over $5,000. But by day 30, it explodes to over $5 million. Compounding happens silently in the background, totally invisible for most of its lifespan, until it suddenly goes vertical. Because we're wired to think linearly, step by step, we inevitably fall into what psychologists call the valley of disappointment. This is that absolutely brutal phase where you're saving, you're investing, you're doing all the right things, but nothing seems to be happening. Your progress just looks completely flat. And it is right here, in this disappointing valley, that 99% of people quit. They get bored, they change strategies, they pull their money out, they interrupt the magic. But wealth? Wealth goes to those who can simply endure the boredom. Section 4. Wealth you cannot see. So we need to fundamentally redefine what wealth actually is. Because frankly, society has sold us a massive lie. We're trying to judge wealth by what we can see, right? The designer clothes, the massive mansions, the luxury vacations. But true wealth is exactly the opposite. Just look at this incredible contrast. Ronald Read spent 25 years pumping gas and 17 years sweeping floors as a school janitor. When he died at age 92, everyone was absolutely shocked to learn he had an $8 million net worth. He just quietly saved and compounded his money, completely out of sight. Contrast him with Richard Viscone. He was a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive who lived in an 11-bathroom mansion and threw these lavish parties. But when the 2008 financial crisis hit, Richard lost everything and declared bankruptcy. The janitor had true wealth. The executive just had highly visible debt. This actually leads us to something called the man-in-the-car paradox. Picture a roaring Ferrari pulling up to a stoplight. Everyone turns to stare, right? But here's the psychological twist. Nobody is actually looking at the driver. The driver thinks everyone is admiring him, but in reality, the people on the street are just imagining themselves in the driver's seat. The driver spent an absolute fortune to buy respect, but he bought zero. None. People don't admire your stuff. They just want your stuff so other people will admire them. And this brilliantly illustrates the critical difference between being rich and being wealthy. Being rich is a current income. It's the money you use to buy visible things to show society you made it. But being wealthy, that's the money you deliberately choose not to spend. It's the invisible portfolio. It's the cars you didn't buy, the first-class upgrades you declined. Wealth is potential. It's this unspent power that just sits quietly in the background, generating options for your future. Section 5. Freedom, the ultimate currency. Which brings us to the ultimate question of this whole explainer. If the goal isn't to buy Ferraris or mansions to impress strangers who aren't even looking at us, then what is the point of all this? Why should we save? Well, the answer is the single most valuable currency on planet Earth, freedom. A really profound study by Cornell University interviewed hundreds of elderly people at the end of their lives. They asked them about their biggest regrets. And get this, not a single person said they wished they had worked harder to buy a bigger house. Not one said they wished they'd owned a fancier car. Their universal, heartbreaking regret was losing control of their time. They regretted the hours they gave to a boss instead of watching their kids grow up. They regretted sacrificing their personal passions just to meet societal expectations. This quote right here just sums up the entire psychology of money. The highest possible dividend your money can pay you isn't a physical object. It's autonomy. Having savings is like having an invisible shield. It gives you the power to look a terrible boss in the eye and say, I quit. It gives you the power to take a year off to care for a sick parent. It gives you the power to wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and know that you own the next 24 hours.
So I'm going to leave you with this question to really test your financial mindset going forward. Every single time you open your wallet or every time you're about to take on a new monthly payment, ask yourself, are you just buying things to satisfy a fleeting ego trip? Or are you buying back your own time? Because at the end of the day, true wealth isn't the size of your bank account, it's the size of your freedom. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Start compounding your patience today, and I'll see you next time.